Okay, here we look at another instance of the Greek hand in the Bible. Here we're going to get to hear actual author Dr. Dennis R. McDonald himself read this out on a podcast, and the other person in the podcast is going to read the biblical response. He's going to be reading from the Iliad and the Odyssey, and then corresponding next paragraph or concept will be the other person reading from Luke in Acts. And see if you can see how wild the parallels here are that you find from this. Let's begin.
Okay, so I'll be the voice of Homer as before, and you're going to be the voice this time of Luke, not of Mark.
Okay.
Odysseus, thought dead, returned alive.
This is in Luke 24, 13 through 43. Jesus died but returned alive.
Odysseus went to his father's farm.
Jesus met the disciples on the road.
Outside the city to see if he would recognize him with his eyes.
Outside Jerusalem, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him.
Laertes was sad as he worked in his garden.
The disciples were sad as they walked.
The stranger, that is Odysseus, began asking questions.
The sojourner began asking questions.
Laertes expressed his sadness over the death of his son and the violence of the suitors.
Cleopas expressed sadness over Jesus' death and the violence of the Jewish authorities.
Odysseus spoke with his father about himself in the third person, but the old man still did not recognize him.
Jesus spoke with his disciples about himself in the third person, but they still did not recognize him.
Odysseus revealed himself by means of his scar and knowledge of the trees, and there was a meal at another venue.
Jesus revealed himself by breaking and distributing bread at a mill at another venue.
Odysseus told Laertes to look at the scar on his leg for proof. Quote, I am that man.
Jesus told the disciples to look at the wounds on his hands and feet. It is I myself.
Those who recognized Odysseus were astonished, and he comforted them.
On recognizing Jesus, the disciples were terrified, and he comforted them.
If Luke's readers picked up these clues and compared the last chapter of the Gospel with the last book of the epic, they should have seen significance to the story invisible on the surface. Odysseus visited Hades without dying. Jesus died and returned from the dead. Odysseus's wound came from a hunting accident. Jesus's came from his execution. The recognition of Odysseus by Laertes demonstrated that the hero had returned home. But the recognition of Jesus by the disciples demonstrated his status as the Messiah who conquered death. Here again, Luke does not merely imitate Homer, he rivals him by exalting Jesus over Odysseus.
Wow.
If you don't see the parallels, you don't see the theological punch.
Wow, that is
Okay, hopefully you see that what we're seeing is a connection of just concepts, but it gets carried through. Now the problem with this also is that it gets carried through in order, and some of these things are so explicit, it makes it impossible to make for it not to be a connected. That literally they're using that as a literary framework and then turning around and putting it in a different way. You'd probably understand this a whole lot better if you were around during that time, because if you would probably know of the Iliad and the Odyssey very well, and that story being told many times over, and so once this story got told, you'd be like, hey, you'd see the parallels within it and the concept, or at least because you had accepted that concept before, you would be more eager or accepting of the concept that's shown here. Now, I did another video where I talk about how just the washing of Jesus's feet recreates the washing of Odysseus's feet when she didn't know who he was, and then her name actually means fame far and wide, and Jesus said she's going to be famed far and wide. Things like that were just said through this too, and when you start making that connections, that's one of those things where after about 3 or 4 of them, it becomes a 1 in a million concept that it couldn't be not anything but taken directly from it. And then whenever you hit on a concept that's so obscure, but both of them have that next, and then another one next, and so on, it becomes impossible to deny. This is just one of like 27 different ones that he has found here, that he has in a book that he has. Again, this is Dennis R. McDonald. And showing you the Greek hand in the Bible. Let me know what you think down below. Peace.